Hey, hope you're doing well today, and thanks for tuning in. So today's message is going to be exciting for me to record because I have misplaced my tripod and I have placed together and rigged up some different parts and pieces I've got around the house to hold my phone up, and I have no idea how this is going to go. So fingers crossed it doesn't fall. But I hope you enjoy the message today. I'm putting together several different things that has come across my mind, that God has put on my heart, and some other things that have just crossed my path and have been really interesting. And as usual, this is where the numinous element comes in, right? As we're on our healing and our growth journey. As usual, there's a numinous element that comes in and just forms a greater message from all the pieces and parts, the bits and pieces, right? And so that's what we're going to do today together. And I hope you enjoy the message. So, yes. So I went to the bank recently, y'all, and I was asked to write down something on a piece of paper for the lady that was working on my accounts. And so I wrote it down and I passed it to her, and she, was typing it in, and she still asked for clarification on what I wrote down. And I told her, and, no big deal. And I told her, and she responded with, okay, thanks. I just want to be really sure. And, sometimes people's handwriting is not so neat. And I was like, yeah, that's true. And then I thought about it, and I was like, is she saying that my handwriting is not neat? And the truth is, it's been many, many years since college. And I can literally remember sharing my notes from class with different classmates that had been absent. And I remember they were neat enough, for them to take and to read, And I remember a classmate sitting next to me and saying, gosh, how do you write that fast? And I could take notes like crazy fast, and they were really, really neat. And somehow I have lost this ability, and over time, my handwriting style has totally changed. Have you guys ever run across somebody that analyzes handwriting styles? That's really interesting. And I definitely think that, our current state of mind, and especially our current emotional state affects pretty much everything, including our handwriting. And just as an example, if you just want to have fun one day, right? If you got some extra time, just like any of us have any extra time, but you can just sit down and try to write when you're in the middle of a really stressful or hectic day. And you may find that it's really, really hard to make yourself just sit down and take the time to write out a couple of sentences. And it's like, that's what happened to me today. And so I'm sitting down writing my notes, and I'm like, what's the deal? Because a lot of times, if you're a returning viewer, I'm sure you've seen on some of my past videos, I'm like, what? I'm trying to read my notes, and I'm like, what's that say? So, and, I guess some of it's natural. We do evolve in many ways, but just kind of interesting. So, as we know, we do grow and change. And sometimes things happen to us, right, that facilitate the growth process. Not necessarily our choosing, or even by our desire, but just good and bad and all sorts of different kinds of things happen. But ultimately, we are, in fact, changed because we have grown in some way, right? It may not feel like growing, because I feel like growing in general this is just my opinion, right? My perspective. But I feel like growing in general is typically associated with a positive thing, being a positive thing. But in reality, it's oftentimes the mistakes and the negative things that happen in our life that grow us the most, right? And so we're going to be talking about reframing what this really means. How there can be a positive outcome in our life from the things that are not positive in the moment. And so we're going to be diving deep into that, looking at the details. And again, I just hope you enjoy the message, and I hope you're doing good today. So, okay. So I've been challenging myself to write different ways today. I started writing with my opposite hand, and I was turning the paper, and I was holding the pen differently, and just trying to write different ways. And I think a lot of it is just the fact that how often do we really even write anymore? I think kids nowadays, even in school, they use computers. They type a lot more than, even when I was in school. And furthermore, you've got your thumbs going on the phone. You're typing out on your phone. So it's just a totally different world, and writing is just not as commonplace. So, but it's just a fun little challenge, if you want to just add that to any other practices you have, where you are trying to keep your brain healthy and active, especially when you've gone through crazy stuff and you're working on rewiring your brain. This is just another activity for you to consider. So I got this book. I stumbled upon this really cool little shop. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago or so, and I just picked up several books they had. And this one is called Knowing the Trees. Discover the Forest from Seed to Snag. And it's by Ken, I don't know if it's Keffer, and it's got illustrations by Emily Walker, which are beautiful, by the way. But it's just a cool little book, and it teaches you all about the forest in general. And there's a section I want to share, just a little excerpt here with you all. On page 186, this section is called Forest Bathing. And I'm not going to read the whole section, but just a little excerpt here. So it says, something as simple as having a potted plant in a hospital room has been shown to speed recovery in patients. Spending time outside has even greater mental and physical benefits. Stress hormones decrease in people after just 20 minutes in nature. Memory and attention span improve 20% after an hour outdoors. And here is perhaps the most surprising part. The benefits are measurable even if the participants report disliking the experience. And I feel like that is just a little example of a greater truth, right? So, and then I just want to share a little bit more. It says, from the research, it's also clear that a walk in the woods can have more health benefits than a stroll on a treadmill. And it talks about onion and garlic just growing in the woods, in the forest, and how they release something, I don't know how to pronounce this, like phytonicides or something like that, as a natural defense to ward off insects. But when we inhale them, it has really beneficial results for us, because they have antimicrobial and antifungal compounds. And so that actually triggers our white blood cells, right? Which is like an immune response that we have. And so that's very helpful with regards to fighting off disease, right? It's just super, super cool. Talks about antioxidants and your blood pressure dropping, and just really, really cool. So just, but it's a mixture of information in this book, really, really cool. And again, just beautiful illustrations. So if you have any interest in nature in general, especially in trees or the woods, I highly recommend this book. But so I especially underlined that part that I shared with you all about the benefits being measurable, even if the participants report disliking the experience. Yes. Yes. And I share that with you to encourage you, because the path, the healing path, and the growth path, both are not just like this, right? They're like this, and sometimes it's like they wrap around like a roller coaster, and then you find yourself back here again. You're like, how did I get back here? I thought I had made progress. And so just be encouraged, and know that you may truly take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but that 1 step back can feel like 5 steps back. But you're still going up the mountain. You see what I'm saying? You're still on that trail, that path, and you're still making progress. So let me give you guys another example. We're going to tie it all together. So I bought these flowers recently, and I've never had these flowers before. And I typically am not super good at having a green thumb, you might say, but I still like to try. It's fun, right? So I bought these cone flowers, and I bought 4 different pots of them, different colors, and they were gorgeous, at Home Depot. Totally gorgeous. And I was really careful to read about them, and I noticed where they had them sitting. They were in the sun and all this stuff, right? So I considered all that when I brought them home. Well, I've planted 2, and the other 2 were still in pots, and that really didn't seem to have an effect on what I'm about to share, but I'm still going to share this with you all. So listen, it's crazy. So I was taking care of them for a couple of days after I bought them, and then I went out of town, and I had a family member come over and water my plants, right? Well, what was weird is just within a few days, right, like when I got back, there was one that was still great. And the other 3 looked like, in different varying degrees, right, looked like they had literally been scorched. Like with a fire torch or something. And I'm like, okay, so they've been watered. They're, in a good place, and one is flourishing. So I know it's not the environment, because again, if you're thinking about like science and you're like, what are all the variables, and trying to figure out like, solve some kind of mystery, you're like, what are the variables? You're like, well, they're all in the same environment, so why is this one doing better and all the others aren't? And so it's, oh man, it was so discouraging, right? But ultimately, the takeaway here to this mystery is just simply nature. It's just simply nature. And so we're going to use these opening examples and the excerpt and everything to move forward with a message that hopefully will be encouraging. So what's the lesson, right? What's the lesson? That's what we're looking for. So just kind of tuck that question away back here in your mind. So I had, as I'm processing, this is what I like to do. I like to kind of, take a few days and just pull in inspiration from my environment, reflect on things, read, be encouraged and inspired by others. All this stuff kind of comes together, and I just kind of sit with it for a few days, kind of marinate in it, right? And until I feel like it, populates, it's like it pops up, this greater message that I feel like is worthy of sharing with you all. So as part of this puzzle, right, this that we're putting together, I've had some Bible verses come to me, and I want to share those with you. So, and this is just out of memory. This is certainly not exact. This is just in my words, okay? So one is something like, if your right hand offends you, cut it off. If it offends you, cut it off. Did I say defend? I meant offend. If your right hand offends you, cut it off. And it's clearly a metaphor. So I just want to be really, really direct about that. So this is per my understanding, right, which is limited, but it's still valuable, I feel like. Considering the fact that we are described as members of one body in Christ, right? So each person is a member within one body. And so the point here is that if there's somebody that is offending you, you have to be strong enough to walk away from that person. It's not out of cruelty. It's not out of feeling like you're a higher class or you're better than or you're judging them or anything like that. It's sometimes, as some of us unfortunately have experienced, can be life-saving, right? But I just want to share some more verses that came to mind. That was one, okay? If your right hand offends you or something like that, cut it off, okay? Another verse is talking about let the dead bury the dead, right? We're supposed to let the dead, again, metaphorically, this is all parables, let the dead bury the dead, okay? And then there's the prophecy, right, of it says there will be 2 people in a field, and one will be taken and one will be left. So this is this all seems like division, doesn't it? Just kind of keep that in mind. And then, of course, a man's enemies will be in his own or of his own household. So, but then, this is where you have to really expand your mind, which I even tell myself this when I'm doing my own private journaling, expanded. That's what I'm doing. I'm expanding my mind to be able to grasp things that seem like, oppositional, polar opposites, and contradictory, when in reality they're not. So it's like a paradox, But just keep this in mind, okay? Because we know that God is described as love, not just being loving, but as love itself. And yet these things that we are being taught seem initially like division, right? So let's look at a little bit deeper at this. So when you are a person with love in your heart, okay, the Bible describes what this means when you are capable of love and you love, which is a verb. When you are a person with love in your heart, you literally do bear all things, which means you tolerate, you withstand, right? But we're going to try to really reframe and grasp this, okay? Okay. And then we're going to be talking about as well oaths and commitments, right? So at what point do you walk away? Not just from a person, but even a thing, something, or an environment, an atmosphere that's unhealthy or toxic, or whatever it is. At what point, how do you make this determination to walk away? Okay? And should you, do you, all this stuff. Okay, let me share this. There's a ministry that I found several years ago. It's pretty cool. It's called Patrick Weaver. His name is Patrick Weaver. And he has a ministry. And what really caught my attention as, one of the predominant messages that he shares, this is just from my perception, okay, is that God doesn't want us to remain in an abusive situation. Because when you think about oaths, like I was saying, one of them, as far as marriage goes, is till death do us part. Well, does that mean till your spouse brings that upon you? You know what I'm saying? Surely a loving God wouldn't want that, right? So, I was really impressed with his ministry, and it was a big blessing to me. At some point in my life, he was very encouraging, and I just really liked what all he had to share and teach. But yes, walking away, I would say, without question, it should absolutely be what we do to preserve our life, right? But we're going to kind of expand on this concept, okay? So Jesus said, and this is Matthew chapter 5, verses 34 through 37, okay? But I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond these is of evil. It's so interesting, isn't it? To think about just society and just our way of life, how commonplace it is to make commitments and oaths and promises and things like that. It's kind of like, why did that come about? What's the reason for that? The necessity, because a person, if you think about it, should just, every word they say should be a representation of who they really are. A person should live so honestly that every word and deed should be a proclamation You see what I'm saying? In other words, I think his point, and I was looking this up too on, gosh, what's that website? I'll drop it in the comments, just to kind of check my perception of this. But to me, this is just, pointing out the fact that should be enough. Like he says, just let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no, and that can be in words and or deeds, right? And that should be sufficient. So let's talk about this for a minute. It's easy to see deception out there, right? But when it's self-deception, it's very hard to spot. And let me just expand on this. For a long time, in my contemplation, my research, all this stuff, right? I just immediately had a response within myself that, that's something that I don't participate in. I'm just an honest person, period. There's no, deviation. There's no if, and, or but, or whatever. You know what I mean? But I want to think about this. I want to reframe this for a minute because this may benefit you too. Okay. So there's this whole philosophy of non-resistance, living a life of non-resistance, right? And so I want to think about what this means, to resist versus to not resist, okay? Because I feel like this is in relation to what I was talking about love, how it's described as bearing all things. So I don't think that we are supposed to apply non-resistance in that regard, that we just allow someone to harm us repeatedly. But instead, we need to apply non-resistance to what our soul is prompting us to do to correct the situation. Because that is where you can sometimes find resistance within yourself. Are you resisting doing what you know you need to do? And here's where you can start to find the difference in the ego's desires versus your higher self's needs, or God's promptings, the Holy Spirit's promptings. This is where you can really start to examine resistance, okay? So, I recall that old saying, to be like water. To be like water, what does that mean, right? Something to think about. So if we make any proclamation, right, and it's the energy behind it is one of certainty and the energy of an oath. It's a proclamation. It's a kind of like you're just you're making such a bold statement. You're planting a flag. So many different ways you can say it, but it's kind of like, this is one way to view it. Okay. This is how I was processing this. Because again, another way to look at what Jesus was saying is, even when you say yes or when you say no, it's kind of like you're bringing that into fruition. I think there's even a verse that says, man shall live by every word. And so it's, you think about things like, spelling and words. And, Jesus being referred to as the Word, the living Word. And there's power in the tongue, and life and death are in the tongue. And, there's something to be said here, right? And I think that we don't give our proclamations and our statements enough reverence. I think that we are not stewarding that in the way maybe that we should. And I think that it's affecting our lives greatly, So maybe we can intervene and just sit down and take the time. And just like when you're trying to, correct your handwriting, and you just have to really work on it because your hand is used to going in a certain motion. Well, your brain, all the I don't know, the neural networks or whatever it's called, the firings and all, the wiring in it, it's got grooves. The experts or whatever, they say it has grooves. And so whatever you have, whatever's familiar to you, whatever you've trained your brain, either intentionally or not, to think, it's going to fall back into those grooves. And so, your handwriting's the same way. You have to actually work at consciously holding your pen differently and moving your hand differently to make it legible and neat in the way you want it to be. Okay, our life is the same way. It's the same way. And sometimes we're like those potted plants. We don't know why we feel like we're just, burnt to a crisp. Like our soul is just, been through it to the degree that it has. I think a lot of times we know why we're stressed out, but we don't understand why we can't recover so quickly. And that's what we're going to talk about. That's going to be the heart of the message. So I hope you stick around till the end. So, yes. So to me, anytime we make a proclamation, okay, a statement with any kind of real heart energy behind it, belief behind it, right? This creative force behind it. To me, it's kind of like creating an attachment, like a spiritual attachment to things. What things? I would say things like expected outcomes, expectations. Okay, and this is all kind of like a subconscious thing. Okay, standards that we impose on ourselves and others, maybe. Commitments that wind up more like chains, that can even keep us bound to the point of danger sometimes. Okay, so those are just some examples. You could probably journal and find more, but the point here is that there are always going to be unknowns in this life. Talking about trying to figure things out, like how can you make a decision? To me, every proclamation means you've made a decision on something. You've made an assumption. You've drawn a conclusion. And how can you stand firm in that and steadfast when there are always unknowns? Always. And there will always be unknowns. Just like one of my favorite Bible verses, I think it's 1 Corinthians 3:18 if I'm not mistaken. If you want to be wise, you have to become unwise. You have to lay everything down that you thought you knew, and that requires a putting off, a cutting off, a pruning, in order to make room or to make way for something new information, a new idea, a new way of life, new people to come into your life that are actually your people. And so, yeah. So, again, there are always unknowns that could have huge impacts on your previously made proclamations and 100% sure statements, right? And we can wind up, because of these proclamations, committed to them through our word, because we said this is what we believe and what we're about and all this stuff. And we can wind up living in resistance and not really understanding that we're doing that, okay? And we can cause ourselves so much stress. And it's not, I don't think we take stress seriously, but stress can kill us. It's a big deal. You know what I mean? Let's take a water break or whatever you have. So, y'all, I've got this little, isn't hair fun? I tell you, it's just, got some new products today I'm going to try out and see what happens, but anyway, again, this is just casual, and I hope that that's beneficial for you to hang out in that way. It's just what I prefer anyway, right? So, but yeah, stress can kill you. It truly can. So there's a story on Medium. It's a website called medium.com. And I had Googled something, right? I had, I'm marinating, I'm processing, and I had this old saying come to me. I don't even know where it came from. How you can be blind from fury, right? Blind fury or being blind from fury. So I Googled it, of course. And and it popped up an article from Medium.com, and it was awful. It's kind of like it gives you like this little intro, and you get hooked in it, and then it's like you have to pay. You have to be a member to read the rest of it. Well, I looked, and it really wasn't that much. I thought, well, I'll just pay for a month and check it out, right? It's a cool article. So if you have membership, I encourage you to do it. But yeah, it's apparently, and I was doing research on this topic, and the article is cool. There's no substitute for it, but apparently, this is a true statement. That's what I'll say. So again, like I was saying in the opening, your emotions can manifest, or however you want to say it, produce extreme bodily results in your body, okay? And so, yeah, stress is important. And so, yeah, so beliefs, proclamations, right? These are essentially, you might say, the foundations of, or really beliefs, rather. Beliefs are the foundation of a proclamation, okay? So what happens when you get new information, okay? What happens when you get new information? Let's say that you have a certain belief, and you've made a certain statement, or whatever it is, and then life teaches you that, oh, you didn't know about this part about a person or a place or situation or anything, okay? So what happens when you get this new information? Well, when you suddenly have some observations and life experiences, right? This can even be in reflection, when you have time reflecting after you've accumulated more wisdom. Then you can apply that to your past too. So anytime you have a present moment or a past observation or life experience move from the unconscious part of your psyche to the conscious part of your psyche, right? Well, at this point, I think sometimes we unconsciously try to make it fit within our current belief system, within our current statements, our current paradigms, whatever you want to say, right? And I think that maybe part of the driving force behind that, even if we're not conscious of it, is that we don't want to be perceived as a liar or a fool. And so we're like, no, I know I'm right. And you might even say this is just being egotistical, not being able to let go of something that you finally learned you're wrong about. And it's not that it's your fault. I mean, deception's all out there. And so, we're too hard on ourselves, a lot of times. But yeah, nobody wants to, even if it's just within your own mind and heart, you don't want to feel like you're just, dumb. And you don't want to feel like, you're a liar because you made this big, heartfelt statement, and so, yes, you come to a place where you literally realize in your life, it becomes real in your life, 1 Corinthians 3:18. And that is, again, I've mentioned it, but it's like anybody that's wise truly will understand their own limitations. You come to terms with that, and that really gets shifted into the forefront of your mind. The fact that you have an unconscious part of your psyche, the fact that there is deception in the world, the fact that you have limitations with your brain, your human brain. There are limitations, right? Okay. So our perception, which is really everything, because it forms beliefs, especially, is limited. So what happens when you receive new information? Okay. What should happen rather? Well, we should make adjustments, okay? We really should. And we may think that we do. But this is where you can really spend some time thinking about certain things in your life that, what are the clues that you haven't really applied non-resistance to what your soul is prompting you to do. It's like if that's not totally done or done properly, or if you're avoiding it and all this stuff, it's kind of like sometimes these things are not really conscious to us. So what are the signs and symptoms that we haven't done what we need to do? Okay, that we haven't done pruning and sufficient changing, right, in our life. I would say discomfort, stress. It can be psychological. It can be bodily. It can be a bodily reaction. Your soul is going to speak up and get your attention one way or another. Okay, so think about this. Think about plants. Let's just use this for an analogy again. If you never prune a plant, it's either going to prune itself, or if it's one that's just really high maintenance or whatever, it's going to be kind of crippling. It's not going to do well if you never prune it, right? Think about trees. Even nature prunes tree branches. A tree will do whatever it has to do to survive. It's going to contort and twist and grow all different ways and drop different branches and stuff. It's incredible, really, But yes, even nature prunes. Okay? So what if you reframed any pruning in your life, right? Any unwanted pruning in your life as a natural process, right? That really needs to happen, okay? To keep you healthy and functional and sometimes alive, much less, happy. It's kind of like you got to be alive to be happy, so that comes first. But it's like, I think we just immediately associate doing away with or walking away from or changing and letting go, anything like that, right? Losing, taking away, anything like that. That energy feels like a loss, it feels painful. Which is funny because there was an old cartoon, Alice in Wonderland. I don't know if there's several different versions or not, but I haven't seen this in many, many, many years. But it's where there's a garden with flowers and they're being cut and they're crying like out in pain when they're being cut. And so it's kind of interesting. I feel like that's us. God's like, just calm down. I gotta cut this off. Like we may not see that there's a disease on this branch, and that it's going to take us down. It's going to take us out if God doesn't cut that off and prune it. And so he can see what we can't see. Again, we have an unconscious part to our psyche. God sees it all. So, but it hurts to be pruned, and so, but it's required. It's required. Not just for new life, but even to sustain it. Something to think about. So let's take a look at the etymology of the word prune. I like to look at that. From the late 14th century, it meant to trim the feathers with the beak, right? So this is about self-care. And of course, this is related. There's a variant called preen, which is the one I'm familiar with regarding birds, that they preen. But prune itself, the word from the late 14th century, to trim the feathers, you have the doing away with, right? With the beak. So a lot of times, if you have a pair of birds, they're going to do this to one another, right? They're going to preen one another. And it's a form of self-care. Again, this is just all around us in nature. We're part of nature. I think sometimes we forget about that, but we're part of it, you know. But also, another meaning is to dress or groom oneself carefully. So, what I find really, really cool about this word is it's both. It's a paradox. It's both a taking away and an adding to. It's both. It's both energies. Okay, and adding to oneself, to take care of. Anytime you take care of yourself, you're giving yourself self-care. Okay, and you can do that by pruning. Okay, and God can do it that way as well. So, yes, to cut back. So there's a word, an old French word. I'm going to totally demolish this. Poignere, I don't know, which means to cut back, like as in vines. Okay, and again, there's a variant which is preen, which is to trim, to dress up, to trim, to dress up, right? So you're accomplishing something good, a good and positive goal, which adds to and takes care of the recipient by trimming, by pruning, okay? So you're having something taken away and something added, which reminded me of when Jesus was saying, you know, he had to go away. He told his disciples, I have to go away, so that the Holy Spirit can come unto you, unto the believers, right? So again, we have something taken away so that something can be added, okay? So let me just close by saying this. If you're like my coneflowers, burnt to a crisp, if that's what your soul feels like you've been through hell, you know what I'm saying, to that degree, just hang in there. Just hang in there, okay? More life is around the corner. The key and the lesson here is don't forget to prune and don't resist it either. So I want to close by saying this. I was actually going to do a short little clip of my coneflowers and pop it in at the end to show y'all the difference, right? That they were in the same environment. You had one that was doing great and one that was burnt to a crisp. Well, this was true literally a couple days ago. And I've only watered them once, actually. And I walked over in my yard to film them, and there's already new growth, a lot of new growth. So this is the way of nature, right? So, which is just a little clue, a little, sign that we have from the one in charge, right? The one that makes it happen, of the way, of the path. And so I hope that you're encouraged by that. I hope that you enjoyed the message. I hope it was entertaining, and most of all, I hope it got the wheels turning. So thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.